The Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustam Umarov led the Ukrainian delegation for talks with the United States in Saudi Arabia on Sunday. And the Defense Minister Umarov described these talks with the United States delegation as constructive and meaningful, focusing on protecting energy facilities and critical infrastructure. The discussions are part of the U.S. President Donald Trump's diplomatic efforts to resolve the three-year Ukraine-Russia conflict. Ukraine's defense minister later shared on social media that the talks were productive and focused, addressing key issues like energy. He emphasized President Zelenskyy's aim of achieving a just, lasting peace for Ukraine and Europe. The Riyadh meeting preceded Monday's scheduled U.S.-Russia discussions. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated on Sunday that the discussions with the U.S. in Saudi Arabia were productive and Ukraine's delegation contributed constructively to the talks.
Today marks the second meeting between the Ukrainian and US teams in Saudi Arabia, this time at a more technical level. Our military, our diplomats, and our representatives from the Ministry of Energy. I just spoke with Rustem Umerov. He briefed me on the meeting and the course of the negotiations. Our team is working in a completely constructive manner. The conversation is quite useful.
Абсолютно конструктивно.
On Monday, a U.S. delegation will pursue progress on a Black Sea ceasefire and broader efforts to end the Ukraine conflict, following Sunday's talks with the Ukrainian diplomats. Now, according to a source, the U.S. delegation, led by Andrew Peek of the National Security Council and Michael Anton from the State Department, met Ukrainian officials on Sunday night and will meet with Russian officials on Monday. The goal is a Black Sea maritime ceasefire to ensure the free flow of shipping. Akshay Dongre is in New Delhi. He's following the story closely and he joins us now. Akshay, what's expected from today's talks between the United States and Russia in this shuttle diplomacy?
Well, Mark, it's a very important meeting as far as this conflict is concerned, because we are seeing in this span of 3 years when the conflict has been going on, this perhaps is the first time when the three parties have in fact not only agreed to discuss the entire conflict and how to negotiate to end the war, but also they have in fact in action come together as well. While the meeting between Ukraine and US has already taken place, let me run our viewers through the pointers about which everyone was waiting as far as the outcomes are concerned. So clearly, as far as the meeting between US and Ukraine is concerned, and while Ukraine is saying that the meeting has been productive, there are certain points that stick out as far as the Ukrainian side is concerned as well, because the US delegation that is involved in talks have clearly stated that there are certain points which will not be agreed to by the Ukrainian side, and one of the most important remains the occupied territory as far as the conflict is concerned. So there are 5 regions which are in questions as far as the war is concerned, Mark. One of them is Crimea, clearly, and the question is whether Ukraine will cede the territory that has been occupied by Russia as far as the further peace talks are concerned. Besides Crimea, it is Donetsk, you have Zaporozhye, you have Kherson and the Luhansk region as well. So about these 5 regions, they are regions where majority of people are Russian speaking. Russia has been claiming these lands for several years now, and now we are seeing that after the outbreak of the conflict, these key regions were in focus by the Russian armed forces as well, and these were the regions that were first occupied by the moving Russian forces, and they were easiest to do so also because first of all they were at the borders with Russia, and the second was that a majority of the population were Russian speaking. So the question remains that whether Ukraine will will agree to cede these territories, and that has been called as the elephant in the room by the US side as well. And now, when it comes to the Russian side, clearly both the countries are warming up. Russia knows that US is not looking at this deal through a mirror that was seen by the previous administration. In fact, they're looking at it as a business deal. What Ukraine can offer US or what Russia can offer. So all the deals are on right now. All the deals are on the table, and that perhaps gives the Russian side some leverage as far as these regions are concerned, and to call that these regions, if the ceasefire comes into effect and permanent ceasefire comes into effect, then these territories will be accepted as Russian now, especially at a time when Russia is already carrying out referendums in these regions, being too confident that the Russian-speaking people will go with Russian side. But whether that will be acceptable to Ukraine, that is the question on which the entire peace talks are resting right now.
Right, Akshay. So you've given us, the broad issues that are at play here. But how much of what's being discussed is actually preliminary at the current stage, is actually being driven by the principles? I mean, I'm talking about Putin, Zelenskyy, and Trump.
Well, clearly, when it comes to principles, Mark, Trump has made it extremely clear that he doesn't want to fund this war anymore. He has stated that his country, the United States of America, has already pumped in about $350 billion in arms and ammunition, in funding, in other ways as well. And Trump administration is now calling for an end to war, and is in fact asking for reparations as well, as far as the expenditure of the United States is concerned. When you talk about the principal stand, the US is very clear that they cannot fund the war, and they will not fund the war anymore. Whereas when it comes to Ukraine, President Zelenskyy has to see how he will strike a balance as far as this entire negotiation is concerned, because from the preliminary angles, when you look at this entire deal, then Russia wants to pull out of the war. I beg your pardon. US wants to pull out of the war. Russia wants to occupy these territories that where its armed forces are right now, and Ukraine wants these areas, and again is sticking to joining NATO as far as its own net security is concerned. So majority of the issues are still where they were at the beginning of the conflict when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. It's just the US whose position has changed. And this entire negotiation will revolve around the expectations of the US right now. So clearly, we are going to look at some very interesting talks between Russia and US, because after Biden administration, this was the first time when the two administrations are actually talking and negotiating as far as this conflict is concerned. And something good may come out for Russia, especially when it comes to the negotiations, because US realizes that Ukraine cannot defeat Russia. It has made it very clear to the Ukrainian side as well that you cannot defeat such a power without the US funding or US weapons, which it is no longer willing to supply to the country.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Akshay Dongre, for following that story for us.